Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Produce, Mix, Fix, and Conquer. My name is Rich Steve Beck. I'm the founder of this community. To find us, go to facebook.com/groups/Produce, Mix, Fix, and Conquer. We're a group, a community of amateurs, intermediates, and pros that have grown to an insane amount of 2,300 audio engineers. We're so honored and blessed with all the guests that we've had on so far, and so excited to share knowledge with one another as well. So talking about incredible guests, so the guest that we have coming up next is an incredible engineer who's multi-platinum. So he's worked with artists such as Jay-Z, Kanye West, J-Lo, and Pitbull. He's also got an incredible YouTube channel. He's got an insane amount of energy that he loves to share with the world. And we're absolutely honored and blessed to bring on Irko. Hey, Irko, how's it going, man?
Woohoo! How we doing? That was a nice intro. I was like, ooh, I want to hang out with that guy.
Awesome. Want to hang out with you as well, man. So good. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you. First question, man. How's the studio build going? We're seeing all
Good,
the videos
man.
on YouTube.
Very good, man. The building itself is finally done. And look at what I'm about to show you. This is what I received 2 days ago. You will be like,
Wow.
What the hell are you showing me? These are isolation pads. So the entire bottom concrete, basically the floor of the existing building will be covered in these things. I bought almost thousands of these things. And on top of this, we'll have the actual floor of the studio. And so what this does is it isolates the floor from the rest of the building. And so that whatever sound is happening up here won't get transmitted mechanically to the rest of the building. So ISO pads in place. These are about to be installed by Francisco next week, and I can't wait.
That's so cool. So cool. So when do you think the build will be finished by? So when are you looking to get everything done?
I hope more or less end of summer. It's a little bit hard with real estate. It has a little bit of a mind and timing of its own. So, you gotta kind of aim more or less. But yeah, end of summer. At this point, though, all the large things, the waiting around for the permits, the design phases, all of that, and the actual construction of the masonry part of the building is all done. So we're definitely over the halfway point at this point. But I don't know if you have ever the chance of doing like a long road trip, like a 10-hour drive or whatever. The last 10 minutes are usually as difficult as the previous 10 hours because it's like, oh, we're there, yes. So that's where I am, I guess.
Oh man, I just love your energy though, man, and your enthusiasm for the whole project as well. So cool. So talking about your enthusiasm and energy, let's talk about your story and where you started off right at the beginning. So as a kid, I understand that you grew up near Venice. Is that right?
Yeah. Born and raised in Italy. The geographical, cultural, and mind state distance of my reality to where I am right now is so massive that for anyone that is an immigrant or that moved for a prolonged amount of time to a different country will probably appreciate what I'm explaining. And it's so surreal. Even just, I think 2 days ago, I was driving around and I was like, I used to watch on my little TV Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, hopping on lowriders, thinking, what, like that's a different universe, right? And now I'm in it. Like this is exactly where I am. Like my neighbor 3 houses down has 2 lowriders, and I see him often drive in front of my thing. Like, and it's like, what? I feel like I live in a movie. So it's surreal for sure. But yeah. Growing up in Italy, the way I approached audio was that, unlike a lot of my colleagues, where music or music instruments were basically the driving attention and magnet to get them interested in audio, most of the times audio engineers are guitar players or drummers or bass players, singers, whatever, right? I'm not. I have always been attracted to audio for the audio, as the audio guy. I remember when I was a kid messing around with any kind of stereo that I could put my hands on, messing around with the EQ, the balance, the faders, or whatever, and that eventually, the passion for bass, for the volume, for speakers and settings and stuff like that, eventually moved to this newly discovered genre for me that was hip hop music, because that music had by far the biggest low end, the deepest bass, the largest presence in the drums and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny how that kind of, got my attention, and I became a hip hop head when I was, teenager, and even before being a teenager. So it's kind of crazy.
That's so cool. And understand as well, then you got into DJing as well as a kid. Is that right? Is that so? Did you like DJ some parties and some clubs, or what did you do back then?
Yeah, it started with my dad bringing home a computer with a CD burner. This was, when I think that the first burner, this one I'm talking about, had the option of burning CDs at 0.25x or 0.5x. So that tells you like how far back in time this was, right?
Yeah.
But with now the new acquired ability of duplicating CDs, anytime I would put my hands on a Busta Rhymes, a EPMD, or a Nas L album, or whatever the case may be, right? I would totally bootleg that crap out of these projects. And it's funny, actually, because oftentimes now I am dealing with those same artists that I grew up listening to, and I always tell them, hey, I was your biggest bootlegger in my part of Italy. But to I guess to my to my side of things, I'm like, if it wasn't for me, your music would have never been heard anywhere else. So I guess I guess that kind of balances it out, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so that's how it started, being like this tastemaker, I guess, for American music that was coming, and that was, again, so far away from our day-to-day, right? And of course that, making compilation CDs or albums, copies or whatever, kind of morphed into DJing. And then I got into the turntablism, so I started getting, my 1200s and vinyls and stuff like that. And eventually that kind of opened up to being the DJ for a lot of Americans that were stationed nearby in nearby Air Force Base, American Air Force Base.
Oh, wow.
Because at the time, at any given time, there's like, I don't know, maybe 30, 40,000 Americans stationed in this base, maybe less. I don't really remember the exact number, but it's a kind of like a little town, right?
Yeah.
And there's people of all backgrounds and families too, which means also kids. And, once they've seen Florence once or twice and Rome once or twice, it's like, all right, like what can a hip hop guy do right there in the middle of fields and stuff? There's nothing there for them to do. And so me becoming the Italian hip hop DJ with eventually a studio too, it was, it was a match that was obvious that it was going to work. And that's what I did for many, many years.
Love it. So cool. So then I understand that you built a studio in your dad's basement. Is that right? Is that what happened? Tell us about that, man.
Yeah. So my dad's garage had basically, imagine like a 3-car garage kind of space, more or less. And 2 were taken over by his stuff and his car. But the other one was kind of like a room. And I was like, I'm going to make my little studio in here, with a little booth. Obviously, no AC, no air circulation, no power conditioning, nothing. It was, the typical, whatever you can imagine. In fact, if you go on episode 2, I think on my YouTube series, you can pictures of it. It was trash, it was nothing at all. But to me, that was the best thing ever, and I got to practice and learn the American culture and language, of course, a lot better. And I established so many relationships and knowledge, and I practiced my muscles on Pro Tools, that when I got to bigger and better places, geographically and in the music industry, it was, it was basically like doing a long 6 years boot camp that allowed me to rip, get myself ripped. And then when I got into the actual field, I was just gunning it, it was just like,
amazing. What gear were you using back then as well? So like what DAW were you using? What outboard stuff were you using? So what did your studio look like back then?
I've always been on Pro Tools. So to me, 3 years, music is Pro Tools for me. I think Pro Tools, I see Pro Tools. Pro Tools is an extension of my hands.
Yeah.
If you see me operating the thing, it's like seeing a pianist play. Like I don't shortcuts everywhere. It's kind of Neo-like. It's like I'm in the Matrix.
In the Matrix, yeah.
Yeah, so it was definitely Pro Tools. Though at the time, Pro Tools was so much more limited than today. Limited track counts. I could not play and do fades at the same time. You had to stop, do the fade, and pick back up.
Wow.
It was crazy. I was on a 001 at the latest edition of the studio. I switched into HD, but for the longest, or I guess about maybe half of the time, I was on a G3 with a 001. The blue rounded guy. So that was that tells you when that happened. It was interesting, but but it was all digital, and I did so many recording, tuning, production sessions. I was basically doing everything. A client would come in with maybe an idea of a song, and they would walk away with the CD of the whole thing. So I would put together a graphic designer for their CD cover. I would, of course, record everything, mix everything in the box, and all of that, until I then stepped up my game and I went to, build Studio B2, which is why this new one is called 3. And the second one had consoles and all that stuff, But there were, I think, 6 years of gap between opening the first one and then going to the second one.
Yeah, tell us about Studio Beat 2 then. How did that transition happen?
So I had, at that time, picked up my only talent that I was like, you're not going to be a client. We're going to put together a project, and we're going to try to sell it, place it, get signed, whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah.
And after maybe 8 months or so of developing this project, I was finally happy with it. I was like, okay, now we can go and hit all the labels in Rome and Milan, basically. And you already know what I'm going to tell you next. Nobody wanted us, of course. That's like the story of any musician, right?
Yeah.
Until this guy calls me, and I was like, I had already given up on the project. I was like, all right, I call it a loss, and that's it. This guy calls me, and he's like, hey, man, you got to come to Milan. I got a label that's ready to sign us. I was like, what? So literally the next day, I get in my car, drive to Milan. I get there only to find out, and now I'm dramatizing the scene, but imagine this, right? I walk into this place. There's like, the lobby with the hot chicks, tits out, music everywhere, screens everywhere. This is, 20 years ago, right? So the impact on myself being at that time 20 years old, it's like a completely different thing than it is today, right? So I walk in, and the guy's like, okay, we're going to sign you, but we only going to sign the artist, not me. So it was a duo that we were selling, producer, DJ, and artist. Right? But what they were interested in was only the artist, not me. So, of course, the next thing was the rainy scene with the camera from above and me going like, no,
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was soul-crushing and completely devastating. It ended up being the best thing that could have happened to me. Because I said, fine, no problem. Take the whole shit, buy me out. Keyword buy. But I need 2 conditions. Number 1, I want to mix this album on a console, a proper console, because up until now I was in the little, G3 mixes, right?
Yeah.
And the second thing was that I basically I wanted to have a creative control on the audio. So it wasn't just that they would say, okay, here's some money to get it mixed, but this is my mix. It's going to be my landmark, my first proper accomplished kind of project. Okay. And so that's what happened. The cool thing was that at that time, years back, we didn't talk about this, but when I was opening my first studio in my dad's basement, I was doing audio engineering in school. And
Yeah.
the second part of that, or I guess the first part of that year that I went to audio engineering school, I was interning for my professor, my Pro Tools teacher. Meanwhile, since we're now almost 6-7 years later, he had closed that studio at which I was interning for him at the time in audio engineering school, and he had opened the biggest recording studio in the northeast of Italy. So I call him and I'm like, "Hey man, I want to mix this album with you on the console. Can we do it?" He's like, "Yeah, but there's a problem. The studio doesn't have doors yet because it was like brand new." So I was like, "All right, whatever, we can make it work still." So I go and do that. And at the end of the session, the 2-week session of mixing the album, he's like, "Look, man, the entire east wing of the building is empty. You want to take over? You want to come and join my my studio?" At this point, I'm 21, 22, something like that. So basically, that big check that I picked up from Milan from the lobby with the tits, I looked at it, smelled it for a bit, and then I put it back into the studio. So I never got to buy me a fancy car or anything else, right? And so that's I basically reinvested everything in myself, and that was not even enough to actually finish building the studio, because the studio building exactly was there. So basically, it's at the same level at which the Studio B3 is right now. So like the building exists, the rooms are about to show up, but it's just a building, right? So from there to taking it to a functioning studio with consoles, gear, and microphones and video systems and everything, that's another little bit of a path. Anyway, it took me about 2 years to do that, to do the big studio. But again, I was now going from a little room in my dad's basement to an actual recording studio with consoles, with live 6 of them. And the biggest one was 2,000 square feet or something like that. It was very large. So I could officially do everything I wanted audio-wise. There was no more limitations on recording an orchestra or a live band altogether or a harp or whatever, right? I could officially record it, anything I wanted.
Yeah.
So that was definitely life-changing. So during these years that setting up the studio took a while, and I was like, my belt was so tight because basically every single euro I would make will go back in the building. And I remember for years I basically survived on my mom's frozen pizzas that she would make over the weekend, and then take them to me, put them in the freezer, and then I would heat them up during the week. And that's how dire the situation was, man. I was like, had no money for nothing, and I mean like nothing, no clothes, no freaking bow ties, nothing. Nothing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But then you went over to New York. Is that right? Is this about the time that you went over with zero money?
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that? So tell us about the transition then, from what made you think at that moment in time, I want to move to, or I want to go over to New York to check out all the studios. What was it that inspired you to do that?
Yeah. So during those 2 years of setting up the studio, I started to also taking guys in to work with me, for me, or for themselves, depending on the situation. So I started doing some training with them.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a difficult thing at first. In fact, for the longest, I turned down any kind of request for, assistance or help or whatever. It was just me, and that was it. But during that time, I started to really expand on the online stuff, because now the internet started to appear in our lives. This was the MySpace era, and a lot of connections were made, and the world kind of started to shrink. And one of the connections I made was with this amazing guy. His name is B Money, originally from St. Louis. At that time, he was living in Tokyo, and he was producing a whole lot of boom bap hip hop for Def Jam Japan. I started to mix a lot of stuff for him. We established a rapport. He was on my top 6 on MySpace, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And at some point, he got tired of Japan, moved to New York, and shortly after he moved, he got a placement with 50 Cent. Now, 50 Cent at that time was one of maybe arguably the most influential rapper of that era. He was the biggest, maybe even, well, definitely the biggest rapper, but he was kind of crossing into just being a celebrity, period, right? So, of course, G-Unit, his label, took over the track that he had placed on 50 Cent's record, and they did not include him, B-Money, in the mixing process.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, as the father of a record, the last thing you want to do is not being involved in the mixing. That's arguably the most important part, besides the actual making of the music, the beat and the song, of course. Mixing is like very, very crucial. But they didn't include him, and he was like, all right, from here on out, it doesn't matter who's the client. Irko is going to be part of my services, as if they want to get my tracks, they gotta get Irko's mixes also. And he started bugging me about going to New York, but again, I had no money. I had just almost finished this place, and it was like, how can I just even fathom, just flying over to the other side of the planet, not knowing anybody besides him, and kind of see what happened. But I was like, this could be actually a very, very important thing for me to do, since the studio now exists, and I can pick on how big recording facilities in New York City are being handled, ran, arranged, cleaned, everything. It was like, I want to learn from the big guys and see how they do it. So I do that. And, I can tell you about this trip for the longest, but I don't want to bore you with all the details. But through incredible hoops and connections and, dark alley and phone numbers exchanges and crazy stuff, man, I managed to get myself into Sony recording studios and so many other ones. But Sony specifically was, the larger recording studio on the planet at the time.
Yeah.
And, anyway, so long story short, I spent 3 weeks in New York. I loved it. I was like, oh, this is definitely the place for me. And eventually I fly back home to a double platinum award for working on Jay-Z's upcoming record at the time with B-Money, the same guy from the 50 Cent placement.
Yeah.
And that was amazing because I had basically a friend, an ally in a new scene that was so large and so established. And even though I still am a nobody, I kind of had a way to kind of peek into this world and see, okay, guys, I may not look like you guys, but I know my shit. I can definitely do this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the snowball started to roll and to go. Basically having the stamp of approval of a guy of that magnitude led me to being able to go and work for Bad Boy and learn consoles, the SSLs and stuff like that. And eventually that led me to a chance of working with J-Lo, and that kind of led me to other through the same guy, by the way. And then that got me to work, do a record with Kanye West. It was all like that. It was all a chain of events that kind of like started. And I don't want to make it sound like it was just a miracle that just kind of happened. I won the lottery and it was like that, though it did happen fairly quickly. And I was going to say effortlessly. That's really the wrong thing. No. It kind of happened on its own after more than 10 years of me busting my butt every single day, 15 hours. So I don't want to sound like it was like, it just happened. What I made the thing happen, and but yeah, that's kind of how the whole thing started. And of course that was like the opening of the doors that were previously closed. And all of this, interestingly enough, kind of happened without me going through the regular channels that typical engineers in America, you would hear if you hear their story, most likely they will have come from an audio engineering school that then placed them into some sort of internship or, maybe to become a runner at a studio or something, only to work their way up, only to then graduate and go solo. I skipped all of that and I kind of did it my way, wearing bow ties. That's me, I guess.
How did the bow tie come about? What was that? Man, you got to tell us. Like, a lot of your videos, almost every video, what was the reason for the bow tie? Was it just a sudden eureka moment? Was it? Or?
Yeah, right. I was at Bad Boy and I was learning the console, the SSL. And at the time, I wanted to film for my YouTube channel, which was in its infancy at that point. But at the time, I used to wear ties, regular ties. Now, if I wanted to strap my GoPro here, obviously the tie would have not worked. So what's the other alternative? The bow tie.
Nice.
So I put one on, and on my way to the studio, 3 ladies, a kid and a lady my age, and then a grandma kind of lady, complimented me for the bow tie. So I was like, oh, wait a minute, the ladies like the bow tie. Cling, 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 cling.
Sorted.
So I started wearing bow ties, and now I have a huge collection, almost 300.
Really?
My lady's, she thinks I have a problem. She may be right.
So cool. So cool, man. You tell us about the era then. So when you started working with Kanye West, J-Lo, what were your favorite songs from that era when you were engineering and when you were mixing? Tell us about some of the projects at the time.
Yeah. So I did the J-Lo project shortly after Kingdom Come. I think it was maybe a couple of years after, tops. Now I don't remember the exact timeline, it's a long time ago, but I was like, well, I got an award for Jay-Z, now I'm doing this stuff with Jennifer Lopez. It kind of goes without saying that I'm most likely going to get another award. Instead, that album totally flopped, so I did not get anything from it at all.
Oh man.
But the cool thing was that I've never done it for the prizes of getting the plaques on the walls, which of course are nice. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, any recognition is nice, but really it's the day-to-day and being able to put together a career out of technically thin air and kind of make that happen. Same with Kanye. He executive produced 88 Keys' first album. And The Death of Adam, which I was very lucky to be involved with at the very ending of the production stage. So basically, I mixed track 1, which was, though, the last one to be produced in the timeline, right? And then when they started lining up all the songs at the mastering session, they were like, whoever mixed track 1 needs to mix everything else because it sounds so much better than everything else. And that to me was like such a almost unbelievable kind of thing, because coming from Italy, where I often say that mafia doesn't exist in Italy in a sense that you don't really get robbed on the street or anything like that. But the mafia mentality 100% exists. That is, if you're my friend, you're good. If you're my cousin or whatever, you're good, right? Which that happens everywhere, of course. There's always like a little bit of favoritism that goes to those that or are family to you. That's normal. That's human nature.
Sure. Yeah.
But in Italy, that is to the point where you cannot do anything if you're not connected with X, Y, and Z person, right? And so the fact that they chose me because of my work, solely because of my work, they didn't even know my face or anything, not even my name, I don't think, and that was like incredible. That was like, I can finally actually get awarded for what I do, what I bring to the table, not because I am the son of this person or the husband of this person,
Yeah.
So that was like very, and I don't know if meritocracy, is that the word? Meritocracy, whatever.
Yeah.
If your merit really truly drive your career anywhere, because it's always about so much more than that, right? Communication, how you present yourself, and how you connect with people. There's a lot more to it, obviously, but that was a very big breath of fresh air for me that really pushed me to say, you can really do this, so yeah, I guess those are my favorite projects, those that allow me to really be the person for the job because I am the person for the job, not because I know somebody,
Absolutely, man. I was listening to thanks so much for that, Irko. I was listening to Good Morning, Black Thought from the Roots, that track that you sent across, man. It's so cool. Tell us about that project and how that came about.
That was a great project. I mixed again one song for that album, not even knowing that was going to be an album. I just mixed one song. And again, the same story. The producer was like, "Oh, you got to do the whole thing now." I'm like, "Sign me up, let's go." Yep. And another very, very good situation, the best situation in which to produce an album is where you have one producer producing the entire body of work for one artist, in this case, Black Thought.
Yeah.
And then one mixer to mix the whole thing. So you have this continuity, this grand vision that you can go from a bird's eye view of the whole thing down to the very minute detail that's very, very small, right?
Yeah.
And that's exactly how that album worked out to be. If you listen to the whole thing from top to bottom, you can totally tell there was a guy, Sean C, that not only produced the actual tracks, but also had a oversight on the entire development, from the skits to the levels of everything, to the style of drums that we have from track 3 to track 4 and so forth. And same can be applicable and has been applied onto the mixes. It was the same thing, even just knowing the playlist and the track count allows me to be a lot more intentional with my choices on, say, this kick drum over this kick drum for the next track, because now we have in mind, okay, where we're coming from and where we're going to. So that was incredible. And then, of course, the roster of guests in that album is incredible. Swiss Beats, Schoolboy, Pusha T, Killer Mike, and the list just keeps going. It's incredible. It was amazing. I really had another one of those moments, like I feel like I'm in a movie right now.
Just the vibe of that album, though, man. It's just insane. As you said there about having that consistency throughout the album, and it's just listening to the tracks there. I've really got recently into a lot of hip hop as well with my mastering, but that album, it's just got a rawness to it, and it's got energy to it, and the vibe throughout it. It just, I don't know how to describe it, man, but it just sounds different to anything else I've listened to hip hop wise. But then again, I like the Roots as well, so Roots is amazing. So with producers and engineers, so what producers and engineers that you've worked with since moving out to the US, who've been your mentors in the US, and who've you learned from while you've been in the US over the last few years?
I cannot say that I have mentors, unfortunately, because I would have loved to.
Sure.
But I have spent 2 days in the studio with Tony Maserati, and that taught me so much that's actually mind-boggling. And the funny thing is that what I learned from him was a lot more on, actually strictly on the communication side. So it was not about knobs twisting or EQs or whatever like that.
Sure.
Not that I didn't care for it, but what I took away the most from that time was the communication, the how to approach talking to the artist and the producer, what questions to ask, how to understand and dissect their answers and turn them into instructions applicable on consoles or faders or EQs or effects, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that's very, very often not even really considered in our world. A lot of times it's like, okay, but what plugin did you use? Well, forget about the plugin. It's important, obviously, but there's like so much more of a component of communication that goes in record making that and that I learned from him big time. Big time.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Okay, just for a moment, if that's okay. I think we're having some people that are having issues logging onto the live. Just for a moment, so we will edit this out of the final interview if that's cool with you, man. Yeah. So what we're going to do, just for a moment, just so people on the groups have got access, we're just going to send across the live of your interview to everyone. One moment. So we're going to share that. Won't keep you a second.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for your patience, man. Really appreciate it. And so if we whiz that across, let's have a look. This is what happens when we're live. Technology. That's the way it goes. Let's have a look.
That's quite right.
Send this across now. And so if we go across to produce, fantastic. Right, so post that there. And right, okay. And posting that there as well. Fantastic. Okay. Lovely. Thanks for your patience on that, Irko. Yeah, man. So tell us as well. So you've been building Studio Beat 3. So when did that dream become reality? Actually, let's go back a bit further. When did you start drawing up the blueprints, man? Well, when did that start happening?
The dream started when I first got to America, for sure. I knew at some point I was going to make it. Not knowing the cost of real estate, especially in Los Angeles, and how long these things take,
Yeah.
That being said, it was 2016 or so when I started to realistically saying, okay, we can actually do this, and started to shop around for a piece of real estate that would be able to house that. It took a long time. And then after that, the purchasing, and then starting the team that was being assembled to do this, that started with the acoustician, then went on to the architect, then to engineering teams. It's a lot. And that took, maybe a year and a half or so to get the team in place.
Yeah.
And then once the designs were more or less approved internally by us, we had to then go and present them to the city, get all the permits and all that. That was another process. And then after that, we started construction about 9 months ago, and that was incredible. I always say that turning air vibration, sound, music, into something that you can walk through, sleep on, live, cook, have guests, it's incredible. You go from the untouchable to the opposite of that, which is the very, very hard real estate. That's why it's called that, right?
Yeah, completely.
And that was incredible. So the process at this point is maybe 70% done. Maybe, I don't know if it's too much of an optimistic point of perspective, but the building actually exists now, and so the next step will be to start doing the interior construction, or assembly rather than construction. And so it's almost there. At the end of the summer, we should be functional. So make sure you get on a plane to come to LA, man.
Oh, I'd love to, man. I'd love to see a studio in operation as well. I've been watching some of your videos on YouTube as well with the construction as things have been going along, and your energy and enthusiasm for it as well, man. I'm just excited for you. I'm excited to see your project and your dream become reality, for you as an engineer, but for your clients as well, man. It's like your clients are going to have a fantastic space to work in. So tell us, what console do you enjoy working on at the minute? Is it an SSL console that you currently work on? Am I right in saying that?
Even if I own a console, the new studio will not have a console.
Really? Interesting. No way. Do tell.
Yeah, so even though we're going to have all the usual suspects for the way in, the tracking portion of the session, the 1176s, the Neve preamps, and the mics, and all of that stuff. In the past, maybe 7 or 8 years, 7, 8 years, I have been mixing completely digitally. So no console for mixing. Now, that being said, my workflow is that once the audio hits the computer, it does not leave the computer. So that's how I approach my mixing. But if you were to do a session there, of course, everything is on the patch. So you can totally use hardware inserts and things like that to use the analog juiciness that's there. You probably know I have all of that stuff already.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely.
You can definitely take full advantage of it. But for my workflow, I'm not. In fact, I cannot wait and switch my entire operation to a M1 based MacBook. That's what's going to be my next computer.
Nice. Amazing. So are you predominantly in the box then? Is that how you tend to mix? This is really interesting because the more guests that we have on Produce, Mix, Fix and Conquer over the last few weeks, loads of engineers are saying, we do everything in the box now. So as an engineer, the benefit to you in the box, is it because you've not got to take pictures of all your outboard gear to then suss out what compressors you've used and what I don't know what settings you've used? Is it the fact that you can just bring everything up immediately, a session, it's all there, good to go? Is it workflow? Is it because it's a faster process for you? Is that the reason why you find in the box a better process for you?
All of the above, Rich. If you asked me this question maybe like 10, 15 years ago, the answer would have been substantially different. Yeah. There's, at that point, EQs and compressors were plug-in EQs and compressors, or anything really, was maybe a nice gimmick. Maybe it was a little toy compared to the real thing. 2021, there's no difference.
Amazing. And what plugins are you enjoying at the minute? What companies are you go-tos at the moment?
I use everything. I am not picky. I am picky, but I use everything and I respect every company, from Waves to Plugin Alliance, UAD, everything. I use everything.
Yeah, amazing. I understand as well. I think I was reading a Plugin Alliance interview with you that you enjoy the MAG EQ4. Am I right in saying that?
That I use on every single one of my mixes. Every single one. Yeah.
What is it about that particular plugin that you enjoy?
When I first moved from the analog to the digital realm for mixing, I started by recreating my analog workflow in the box. Exactly the same. No advantages, no nothing. Like I was like, let me just recreate exactly what I use and what I do on the console, right?
Yeah.
And once I had that down and I started to see that I could get results, at first it was very frustrating. I'm not going to even lie about that. It was like, how the hell am I supposed to recreate the warmth of an SSL cranked up to the red, right? It was very difficult.
Yeah.
Eventually, I started implementing and accumulating other tools, like say, I don't know, like the Fab filter doesn't exist in real life, right? It's
sure.
It's an EQ that's its own thing, which I love, by the way, I use all the time.
Yeah.
But when I first started, I only would use the usual suspects and the tools that I was familiar with, the 1176s, the tube techs and everything. And the Moog EQ was one of those. I always appreciated having one of those airbender-like curves on my master bus. And so even to this day, 20 years later, I use it on every single mix of mine, every single one.
Out speakers as well. What speakers are you enjoying using at the minute?
N-stands and Augsburgers. Those have been my bread and butter for the longest, and you'll see them at the new studio too.
Incredible, fantastic. Are you working on headphones at all at the minute? Do you use headphones for like just listening to any, I don't know, sibilants and that sort of stuff? Or
I check my mixes always. Small, medium, and large speakers, little earbuds. The old school OG white iPod earbuds.
Mm-hmm.
Which at this point they're so beat up. Look, I have them right here. I use them all the time.
Amazing.
That's probably, when people ask me the cheapest piece of gear they use every day, these guys here, they're so cheap that I don't think you can even buy them at this point.
Absolutely.
That, and then yes, headphones also. Yeah, I like to do the extremes. So like I go from something like that with no bass, and no tuning or anything, and in ears to the over the ears Bose noise cancellation headphones, so that I have the two extreme, right?
Nice. And the car test.
And the car test.
The Irko car test as well.
Course.
So I've got to ask you, what car are you actually testing the songs out in? I watch the videos and you're there, pulling all these faces and the subs hitting you at like 40 hertz. What car are you driving, man?
I drive a BMW.
Oh, nice. What speaker systems in there? What speakers are
It's
you using?
the built-in, whatever they have in the car. It is the like, it's not the regular one. It's the one with the sub in it. But I
Nice.
didn't add it or anything. It's just the one that came standard with the car.
Amazing. It's just so cool just to see a pro engineer like yourself still does the car test as well, like the rest of us, which is amazing. It's so important just to get that translation as
Of
well.
course,
Fantastic.
every day.
So cool. Tell us then when you've got bands in or when you've got artists in. So when you're recording a hip hop vocal, tell us about your process. When you've got an artist in recording vocals, for example, like what's your chain and how do you like to approach the vocalist? What microphones are you using? Tell us about your process for vocals.
I like to have two very distinct style of microphones down for the vocalist. So it could be like a tube-like thing, and
Yeah,
then opposite of that, it could be a dynamic or maybe a ribbon or something like that, right? So that I have very different flavors. Then those would go into my usual suspects for the preamps, Neve, API, stuff like that. And then from there, it will most definitely go to an 1176 Silverface if possible. If it's hip hop stuff, if it's rap
yeah,
stuff, most definitely that will be my chain. If it's a singing thing and we need to be a little more forgiven with dynamics, I will probably go to an LA2A, a Tube Tech, something a little softer and ever so present, but less impacting in the dynamic
yeah.
signature. And and then other than that, I like to audition microphones because there is no way to tell what the best match is. Price tag on a microphone does not necessarily mean quality for that vocal you're about to record. So it does happen. It has happened several times that a $10,000 microphone does not sound as good as a $2,000 microphone on a vocal. So because there's no way to tell, test it out, do the mic tree, give it a quick test, and you'll see it real quick.
Amazing. Do you sometimes have artists come into the studios and they're saying to you, Irko, I already know which microphone I want to use? Or do you just think, okay, let's try a few things out, and as the engineer, I'll give you some ideas? And then is there a bit of toing and froing between you and the artist to get that particular vibe right for the artist?
Mm-hmm. It has happened that a client says, I sound good on this vocal, on this microphone.
Yeah.
But it's rare. I'm usually
Yeah.
the one that's making those choices.
Fantastic, amazing. Tell us about beat making as well. So I know that back in the day, when you were near the airbase making beats, tell us about your process when you're working on beats with your clients as well. What's your average, I don't know, few hours making beats? What does it look like? I understand you use loop machines as well. So tell us about your process making beats.
I was strictly sample based. That was my bread and butter. My producers of reference at that time were most definitely Timbaland, with Timbaland and Dre, with a little bit of Neptunes and a lot more of track masters, maybe Eric Sermon too. Those kind of guys. So definitely boom bap stuff. And so I was strictly sample based. So I would just basically get some sample from somewhere, and then eventually that sample digging kind of morphed into having musicians in the studio playing with me. So that's what it looked like. That being said, it wasn't that nothing consequential ever came out of those things. Besides, I guess, in the Italian scene, which it's like this big, so it doesn't really matter that much.
Tell us about what's the strangest thing you've ever sampled? I know that one of the samples, I was watching one of your videos and I heard a racetrack sample, if I'm right in saying that.
Oh
Yeah. Tell us about that.
That was super dope. The craziest thing that I recorded and sampled was, well, besides the obvious Italian music that had nothing to do with no hip hop. So that's already kind of funny. But no, I guess real stuff, like real music instruments, like obscure music instruments. But that was in the second studio, of course. And the other cool thing was definitely to recreate samples that was really interesting. Getting that perfect sample, and then for whatever reason, having to replace it and generate it. So 'cause it's not only just recording it; it's also having that imprint of texture and of audio, right?
Yeah.
So try to chase that analog 60s, 70s sound with the full digital machines at the time was very difficult. So that will be that. The other weird thing, I guess, the other strange thing that I can think of is sampling my brother singing. He's not a singer, and he was a kid. And now, we're like, he's 30, I'm 40. We're listening to that record that we did 20 years ago. He sounds like a chipmunk. It's hilarious.
Amazing. Tell us about any funny studio stories. Obviously, maybe not name names, but any funny studio stories from over the last few years?
My studio experiences have always been very, very respectful and nothing crazy. I guess when they see a Bill Nye looking guy running the stuff, they tend to behave better, I guess.
Yeah.
But I would say, one that kind of comes to mind, I guess, is one that I booked in New York, where the session started at midnight, start time at midnight.
Wow. No
That's
way.
like, wait, so if we start at midnight, so that's one. Another one I would say, the incredibly loud records. The sessions for doing these hip hop records. We're talking, 120 decibels of, like, the stuff was beyond loud. That's definitely a thing. Yeah, another, I guess, when working with celebrities, you get to see them as dudes and girls. They're not, they are of course very famous, but ultimately we're all guys. And also I've learned so much by working with mega millionaires, not people that are just a little richer or just wealthier. I'm talking about like people that are like the GDP of countries.
Sure.
And I learned so much from that too. The down to earthness of those kind of people, especially when they worked for that money, not the money just came. So yeah, no, I guess the one thing that I can think of is that I remember reading on Scratch magazine in the late 90s that Dr. Dre would run a cable from the control room out to the parking lot in which his car was parked, just to test the mix in the car without having to print CDs or whatever in real time, basically. And as soon as I was able to do that, I totally freaking did that, Rich. I was like, I don't care what it is. I'm going to go buy me a long ass cable and we're going to run it through the window. I don't care. That's what we're doing.
I love that. That's so cool, Irko. So cool. How do you look after your ears as well? I ask a lot of engineers this, but what do you do to make sure that your ears are finely tuned and you're looking after them?
I definitely don't monitor at loud volumes. I have not for a long time. I do the occasional blasting, of course, but it's nowhere close to what it used to be. Though that being said, I know of my deficiencies. I know, both of my ears don't hear the same, and I'm aware of that. And so I gotta kind of work around it. It's, I just know that my right ear has a dip at 2.5K. So when I go in, the last time I got my ears checked, I was like, you're about to be surprised. I have super hearing. And the lady was like, okay, whatever. She did the test, and then when I got out, I was like, dip on the right at 2.5, right? She was like, how, what? I'm like, I'm an audio engineer. I do this for a living. I've been for 20 years. She's like, oh, that's what's happening. I'm like, I told you. So I don't really do anything particular. The last time I got my ears checked, the doctor told me to actually do nothing to them besides just running warm water into them when showering. So that's all I do.
Fantastic. Absolutely amazing, man. So that's so cool. So I was trying to think as well with your approach to recording live music as well. So obviously we've had a chat about beats and creating beats and using loop machines, but with live bands as well. How often are you working with live bands? And the hip hop stuff that you work on is incredible. Is it predominantly hip hop that you're working on, or do you work with a few live bands as well and different styles of music? What sort of stuff do you enjoy working on with live musicians?
I love working with live musicians, and also my main genre is the music I like. So whatever that really means. And granted, of course, I have a boatload of hip hop credits, so I do naturally attract a lot of that. But I do just about anything as long as I like the music. Namely, a lot of urban, of course, but also alternative bands and projects. A lot of I love reggae music, so I do a lot of more diverse things. Recording live bands is one of the most fun things that I could think of. I love that stuff. Doesn't happen that often, obviously. It's a little bit of a lost art, unfortunately. Yeah. But I definitely love doing that, and even more so, if I can put them all in one room and record them at the same time, I love doing that. And that is the only application for which I still feel like being in front of a console, there's still a reason and a added benefit, because I can have so many things running at the same time that mousing around Pro Tools and looking at a preamp over there and a compressor over there it's not the same. It's not the same. No. So for that, I would still go to a big studio with all of this stuff that I just described to record live bands, especially if they're working, if they're recording at the same time.
Incredible. What about saturation as well? Do you use much saturation when you're mixing? Is there any particular saturation techniques that you use?
One of the first things that I've noticed once migrating into the digital realm was the cleanliness. It's so pristine that it was almost surgery room clean. And that's not exactly being interpreted as a good thing for the listener. So recreating that that dirtiness, that variable of something that's happening on consoles by the ways of electrical fluctuations or just dirtiness or just differences between this channel and that channel, right? It's just not there, So I worked hard on recreating that exact thing. So saturation is most definitely a very big component of my sound. In fact, speaking of the Black Thought album that you were referring to earlier, it's all over it. In fact, a lot of people are surprised that I mixed the entire thing digitally, because it does not sound like it. No. But the state of the affair in 2021 is that the digital can be made to sound to whatever you want.
Yeah,
that goes to show,
It sounds incredible listening to it. And I'm thinking as well with, I've talked to a few engineers about LUFS as well, and we've all talked about it. So I'm sure you've seen it on various forums and various YouTube videos on the loudness wars over the years as well, especially on hip hop. Like you said, Irko is so super, super loud. What are your thoughts on LUFS and the streaming services? So do you tend to aim for what the streaming services want at -14, or are you like some other engineers that we've talked to, maybe mixing, mastering at -8 or -9? What's your approach when it comes to the streaming services?
So the LUFS number is just a number, like age. It's nothing but a number. My rule of thumb is that I'm not aiming at a number. I'm aiming at making the song as loud as it'll go. And I will stop at the point at which after it just gets there's a degeneration of the mix. So there's a sweet spot where you got the most volume and the most dynamics out of the mix. If you push past that, you're only gonna get volume. You're gonna lose on the dynamics. So I'm trying to aim for that sweet spot, which for me could range from band-like projects to upwards of maybe even -5, which is loud as fuck.
That's crazy.
To a minimum of maybe 11 or something like that. Now we're talking about the loudest peaks here at -5, of course. On an average of the whole song, it's probably like 7 or something like that. Which is still loud though, because obviously it's gonna get turned down a lot. But the thing is, the LUFS, it's a measure, it's a computer readout of what it thinks that we hear, which is why if you play a lot of these big records on the DSPs, they still sound louder than others. So how is it that even though the LUFS reading is the same, maybe, or it's claimed to be the same, our experience is not?
No.
So that's why I'm like, forget about all the numbers. I'm just going to maximize the presentation of this record to its loudest point, considering that I don't want to go past that where the territory is now being damaging to the mix.
That's so important. As you said, it's my I think I've mentioned off camera that I'm very much a beginner mastering engineer, but going to the intermediate stage, and I've got a mentor, a guy called Tony Jack the Bear Mance, that's helping me learn as well. And he said it's all about, like you said, rather than, like you said, Irko, rather than reading the meters, it's all about listening to the colors and the vibe of the track and going with your ears. And he said just literally, I think a couple of engineers said this to me, that just literally I think Tim Palmer was another one, just literally just close your eyes or just turn off the screen if you can, just to listen to the music, man, and just approach it that way. So cool. But
that makes such a big difference, because ultimately it does not matter what you're seeing on the screen, right? The listener is probably going to listen to this on a Spotify playlist while working out or something,
Yeah.
It needs to work in the auditory realm. That's it.
Absolutely agree. I've got another question for you as well. So for fun, I know that you're known for your hip hop and you're known for working with some incredible artists, but what artist is on Irko's playlist? What music do you listen to for fun outside of the studio, or do you not listen to much music outside of the studio?
I listen to alternative records a lot. I listen to classical music a lot. I listen to a lot of instrumental stuff when doing other things. But of course, I listen to the charts, and I'm very aware of the currents and the sounds and the fads of the week or whatever. I listen to Arctic Monkeys, Black Keys, that kind of stuff for the band side of things.
Nice.
I listen to a lot of stuff. I can actually, I can look up my history, but I'm very diverse when it comes to taste of music. One time I may be doing a stretch of a couple of weeks where I'm only listening to R&B music, and then some other times I'm just going back to my classics and my 90s hip hop. It really depends on the mood and the vibe.
That's cool, man. Have you heard, so if you're into Black Keys, have you listened to any Raw Blood as well? As I know that kind of Raw Blood's got a similar vibe. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to those guys.
Not sure if I have.
Yeah, so you check it out, man. It's very, they're really big over here in the UK, and in the States they're pretty big as well. But there's like a really sort of bluesy rock vibe to them, similar to Black Keys. So check them out, though, man. It's they're really cool. But it's just a bass player and a drummer, and that's it. It's like, that is their vibe, and they sell out festivals over here. But I know that Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters are really into those guys, but they're absolutely incredible. So before you go then, Irko, so what is next on your journey? Obviously you've got the studio build, man, so tell us what does tomorrow's chapter look like for you?
That definitely is going to be it. Has been for a minute too. The studio has been a huge landmark for me, professionally, personally, everything. I'm also gonna have, for the first time, I'm building out my team. I will have Steph, who's my recording engineer, who will be working at the studio 24/7. He's going to be living there too.
Wow.
So forming and seeing like the growth of my team with him being the first one is going to be interesting. And then after that, most likely I will, besides the regular mixing and regular sessions that are going to happen there, because it's a whole building, it's perfect for events, weekend retreats, workshops, music video presentations, you name it. We can do whatever we want there, which is why I was saying that we should definitely do an event with you and your audience in LA. That would be great. So all of these things, the fact is I keep saying that one of us has a place where a lot of stuff can happen, so sky's the limit. Who knows, you know?
It's so exciting, and we would absolutely love to come over to LA and hang out with you in your studio. And I think what I've noticed about the community as well, Irko, which I know you've been a part of, and many other engineers as well. And we've been so honored to have such huge support. And education is a massive thing for us at the minute. And I know that you've worked with a few universities. You said you came over to the UK at one point as well, if that's right, and you've worked with some universities. So
yeah, I've done I think like 30 or 40 events. I call them speakeasy workshops.
Wow.
Everywhere in the world. And yeah, like I said, I think it's like 30 or 40, and I've done so many different things, like from you know, one-on-one classes to week-long classes where we're doing a whole band, to speaking in front of an audience of 300 just to be kind of like a motivational kind of thing, like you can make it in America kind of thing, you know. So yeah, I'm totally down to do those kind of things, and even set up you know, weekly appointments with clients, and training programs for engineers. Yeah, I kind of like put a little bit of a pause on that during the construction of the new studio, and then with COVID, of course, that, you know, wasn't really an option. But once this is over, I'm definitely interested in expanding all of that and you know, give back.
Completely. I love that, man. I just love your energy and your enthusiasm as well. And as you said, it's like giving back is absolutely incredible. And it's a big thing. And I've said this over the past few weeks, so doing these interviews, but just knowing the fact that, you know, an 18 or 19-year-old kid, or maybe a 60 or, you know, 70-year-old might just be getting into audio engineering and then getting inspired by, you know, the people on the community, or maybe some of these interviews, or listening to your work or whoever else's work as well. Who are we to judge who the next big, you know, producer or engineer or mastering engineer is going to be? But if we can be part of their journey and their and, you know, just enjoy helping them move on to the next chapter of their journey, then that's amazing. And I just love the fact that you've just taken this massive leap from Italy and then going over to the States as well, then, man. And, you know, your journey is absolutely incredible. So but yeah, we'd absolutely love to come over and hang at some point. And as well, tell us your YouTube channel. Tell us the address for your YouTube channel to check out.
It's Irko Studio Beat, BEAT, everywhere, and that's all my social media. But if you put Irko, no one will pop up besides me. So I'm very Googleable.
Absolutely. Oh, so cool, man. Irko, anything else you want to say before you go today, sir?
No, that's it. Just you know, definitely keep in touch with me every Wednesday. I got a new episode on my YouTube about the construction of the studio. This one today was about the entrance, so that's the first thing you're gonna get to see. And then I'm gonna have another one coming up about the ISO pads and the speakers and the wiring and then the framing. It's a long way, so definitely come and check in on my YouTube every week about that. Other than that, yeah, just stay tuned, follow me on the social media stuff, and make good music.
Absolutely. Okay, so honored and blessed. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. And so everyone, feel free to go onto our YouTube channel as well, which I know a lot of people have watched today, which is youtube.com/produce, mix, fix, and conquer. Also, our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/produce, mix, fix, and conquer. Again, Irko, thanks for your time today. Feel free to stay on the stream to have a quick chat afterwards. But any questions anyone's got for Irko, I'm sure Irko will be happy to answer them over the next few days as well, about his incredible new studio build and the next projects he's working on. But thanks again, Irko. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you, man.